She was left at the altar by the richest man in town. Years later, her return will change everything. The sound of guests murmuring filled the lavish church as Clara stood behind the heavy wooden doors. Her heart raced, her hands gripping the bouquet tightly. The chatter faded when the organ began its melodic introduction, signaling her moment to enter. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her simple white gown a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. Victor waited at the altar, his jaw set, his hands clasped in front of him. His dark tailored suit complemented his confident demeanor, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. As Clara approached, their eyes met, and she gave him a warm smile, unaware of the storm brewing within him. The ceremony began, the priest's voice echoing in the grand space. Victor's parents, seated in the front row, exchanged glances. His mother's disapproving expression was impossible to miss. Clara's humble upbringing had always been a point of contention. Victor Aaron Edwards, do you take Clara to be your lawfully wedded wife? The priest's voice cut through the tension. Victor froze. The silence was deafening. Clara tilted her head slightly, confusion evident on her face. Whispers rippled through the congregation. He glanced at his mother, whose expression hardened. His father's gaze shifted away, avoiding eye contact. Victor's voice faltered. He looked back at Clara, her hopeful eyes searching his for reassurance. His throat tightened as his palms began to sweat. I can't do this, he blurted, stepping back. Gasps erupted from the guests. Clara's bouquet fell from her trembling hands as her vision blurred with tears. Victor turned to the stunned priest. I'm sorry, he stammered before walking briskly down the aisle, ignoring the shocked expressions and hushed whispers that followed him. The doors slammed shut behind him, leaving Clara standing alone at the altar. The humiliation burned through her chest as her knees threatened to buckle. Her best friend, Emma, rushed to her side, steadying her. Clara, let's get you out of here, she whispered, her voice gentle but firm. Victor's car sped away from the church, his mind a whirlwind of guilt and justification. He told himself it was for the best, that Clara deserved someone who could give her a simple life without the burden of his world. Inside the church, Clara's mother gently guided her daughter out a side exit, shielding her from the stares and murmurs. You don't owe them anything, her mother whispered, her voice steady despite the heartbreak visible in her eyes. Outside, photographers swarmed, their cameras flashing as Clara emerged. She kept her head down, her cheeks stained with tears. The reality of the moment hit her like a tidal wave. She was no longer a bride, but the woman abandoned at the altar in front of everyone she knew. Victor's absence lingered like a shadow over her as she climbed into the car, waiting to take her home. The cheers of her wedding day had been replaced with whispers of pity and judgment. As the car pulled away, Clara's trembling hands gripped the edge of her seat. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing. Her life would never be the same. The streets of her hometown came into view as the car rolled to a stop. Clara's hands were still shaking, her mother beside her, silently supportive. The neighborhood was a far cry from the grandeur of Victor's world. The faded storefronts and cracked sidewalks told stories of modest lives and quiet struggles, a world Clara had left behind when she dreamed of something bigger. Stepping out of the car, Clara was met with curious glances from neighbors. The news had spread faster than she had expected. She could hear whispers as she walked toward the small house she once called home. Her childhood bedroom awaited her, untouched by time, a poignant reminder of where her journey began. Her mother broke the silence as they entered the house. You're safe now. Take your time, she said, her tone both comforting and firm. Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face as she sank onto the edge of the old bed, her wedding gown now a crumpled symbol of broken promises. Hours passed before she emerged from her room. Her mother had prepared tea, its warmth filling the small kitchen. Sitting across the table, Clara stared into her cup, her thoughts swirling with humiliation and betrayal. Why wasn't I enough? She asked softly, her voice cracking. Her mother reached across the table, placing a hand over Clara's. It was never about you not being enough. It was about him not being ready to see what truly matters. Her words offered little solace, but they planted a seed of understanding. The following days were a blur of neighbors' visits and polite but invasive questions. Clara's best friend, Emma, came by often, her presence a rare source of comfort. Emma brought stories of shared memories and humor, trying to remind Clara of the strength she had forgotten. "You're stronger than this moment," Emma told her one evening as they sat on the porch. "Victor may have walked away, but that doesn't mean you've lost everything." Clara listened, her gaze fixed on the quiet street. She knew Emma was right, but the path to believing it seemed impossibly long. Still, the small spark of hope in her words stayed with Clara, a fragile light in the darkness of her despair. Clara woke up the next morning with a heaviness that felt unbearable. The world outside her window moved on, as if nothing had happened. Birds chirped, neighbors passed by on their way to work, and life continued despite her broken heart. She pulled herself out of bed, forcing her feet to hit the cold floor. Her mother's voice called from the kitchen. "Breakfast is ready." She joined her mother at the table, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. "You don't have to face everything today," her mother said softly. Clara nodded but remained silent. After breakfast, she wandered to the backyard where her father's old toolshed stood. Memories of him tinkering with odds and ends flooded her mind. He had always said, "When something breaks, it doesn't mean it's useless. It just needs some care." Her eyes fell on a sewing machine covered in dust. Clara's mind drifted to the dresses she had made as a teenager, stitching them late into the night to earn a little extra money for her family. She reached for it, wiping the grime off its surface, and felt a flicker of purpose she hadn't felt in weeks. By afternoon, Clara was seated at the kitchen table, the sewing machine humming steadily. She had found old fabric scraps in the shed and began piecing them together. Her hands moved instinctively, creating something out of nothing. Her mother watched quietly from the doorway, a faint smile on her face. Word spread quickly in the neighborhood. Within days, neighbors came to Clara with requests to mend torn clothing or create simple outfits. Her skill and attention to detail quickly made her sought after, and what started as a distraction became a small business. For the first time since the wedding, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Emma stopped by one evening, a bag of fabric in hand. "You've started something amazing," she said, her admiration evident. "Maybe this is the beginning of something bigger." Clara smiled, a flicker of pride lighting her face. "Maybe it is," she replied, though the thought of a larger future still felt fragile. Each stitch she made seemed to mend more than fabric. It began to mend her heart, one piece at a time. Weeks turned into months, and Clara's small sewing business began to thrive. Customers from neighboring towns came by, drawn by her reputation for detailed craftsmanship. Clara's confidence grew with every satisfied client, but she maintained her humility, often offering her services at discounted rates to those in need. One afternoon, a well-dressed woman entered Clara's modest workshop. Her elegant demeanor and warm smile immediately stood out. "You must be Clara," she said, extending a hand. "My name is Grace Carter. I'm part of a nonprofit organization that supports women entrepreneurs. We've heard wonderful things about your work." Clara blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond. Grace continued, "We're hosting a showcase event in the city, and we'd love for you to present your designs. It's an opportunity to gain exposure and connect with others in the industry." The idea both excited and terrified Clara. She glanced at her mother, who had been listening from the doorway. Her mother gave her an encouraging nod. "You should do this," she said firmly. After much deliberation, Clara agreed. Over the following weeks, she poured her energy into creating a collection of unique pieces for the showcase. Late nights at the sewing machine became routine, her determination fueled by a newfound sense of purpose. The day of the event arrived, and Clara stood nervously in the bustling venue. Rows of beautifully decorated booths surrounded her, each showcasing impressive creations. She adjusted the display of her own designs, hoping they would stand out among the competition. To her astonishment, people stopped by her booth, complimenting her work and asking questions about her journey. Grace appeared midway through the day, beaming with pride. "You're a natural," she said. "This is just the beginning." As the event wound down, Clara felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had taken a step out of her comfort zone and found validation in her efforts. For the first time, the pain of the past seemed to fade, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. The showcase proved to be more than just an event. It became a turning point for Clara. Days after the event, she received an email from a small boutique owner in the city, offering to feature her designs. The boutique, nestled in a trendy neighborhood, was known for supporting unique and emerging talents. Clara hesitated at first, overwhelmed by the scale of the opportunity, but her mother's encouragement pushed her forward. Clara poured her heart into creating a collection worthy of the boutique. Every design reflected her journey, weaving together her struggles and triumphs. Late nights became the norm as she worked tirelessly, sketching ideas and bringing them to life with meticulous attention to detail. Her mother often joined her, offering tea and quiet support, while Emma popped in to provide feedback and keep Clara grounded. The boutique's grand opening arrived, and Clara's nerves were palpable. She stood at the entrance, watching as crowds filtered in, their eyes scanning the displays. Her collection was prominently featured, each piece accompanied by a small card that shared a snippet of her story. To her surprise, many lingered, reading the cards and admiring her work with genuine interest. A young woman approached Clara, her eyes wide with admiration. "Your designs are stunning," she said, "and your story is so inspiring. I'm starting my own business, and seeing what you've done gives me hope." Clara felt a swell of pride and gratitude, realizing that her work had touched someone beyond the fabric and seams. As the evening progressed, the boutique owner approached Clara with a smile. "You've exceeded every expectation," she said. "Customers are already asking about your next collection. I see a bright future ahead for you." Clara's success at the boutique opened doors she hadn't dared to dream of. Invitations to other events and collaborations poured in, and her designs began gaining recognition in broader circles. But amidst the growing opportunities, she remained deeply connected to her roots, often revisiting her old neighborhood and supporting local causes. One day, as Clara worked on a new design, her mother walked in with a letter. "It's from the city's art council," she said, handing it over with a knowing smile. Clara opened it cautiously, her eyes widening as she read the contents. The letter invited her to join a panel of mentors for young designers at an upcoming community event. For Clara, this invitation wasn't just another milestone. It was a chance to give back, to be the person she had once needed. The seeds of change planted during her darkest moments were now blooming into something truly extraordinary. As Clara's success flourished, a name from her past resurfaced in a way she had not expected: Victor. One evening, as she reviewed sketches for her next collection, a simple envelope arrived at her workshop. It bore no return address, but inside was a letter written in an unmistakable hand. "Clara, I have followed your journey from afar, and it brings me both pride and regret. Your strength and talent inspire everyone you meet, myself included. I would like the chance to explain, not for forgiveness, but to bring closure to the pain I caused. If you ever wish to talk, I'll be in the city next week. Victor." Clara stared at the letter for what felt like an eternity. She had imagined what she might say to Victor countless times, but now the opportunity was in her hands. Her heart warred with itself, half wishing to confront him, half wishing to let the past remain buried. The days leading up to Victor's proposed meeting passed in a blur. Emma urged caution, while her mother simply said, "Follow your heart, but protect it too." On the day of the meeting, Clara found herself standing in front of a cafe in the heart of the city, clutching the letter. Inside, Victor sat at a corner table, looking both familiar and foreign. The confident man she had once loved now appeared subdued, his eyes carrying a weight that had not been there before. As their eyes met, he stood, his voice soft. "Clara." She nodded, her resolve firm. "Victor." What followed was a conversation that neither of them had anticipated, one filled with honesty, pain, and unexpected revelations. Victor spoke of his regrets, the pressure of his family, and the emptiness he had felt since that fateful day. He explained how his mother's disdain for Clara's humble background had fueled his doubts, and how walking away had left him haunted. Clara listened, but did not console. She spoke of her strength, her journey, and the life she had built despite him. "You leaving was the hardest thing I ever faced," she admitted, "but it made me stronger than I ever thought I could be." Victor's shoulders sagged under the weight of her words. "You've become everything I always believed you could be," he said quietly. "I hope someday you'll forgive me." By the time they parted ways, there was no embrace, no rekindling of lost love, only a quiet understanding. Clara walked away feeling lighter, as though a chapter she had never finished writing had finally come to an end. For the first time in years, she felt free of the shadow Victor had cast over her life. As she returned to her workshop, she resolved to channel the emotions stirred by their conversation into her work. The past no longer felt like a chain holding her back, but a story she had overcome. The meeting with Victor became a turning point, not for rekindling old ties, but for solidifying Clara's sense of independence. She returned to her workshop that evening, more resolved than ever to focus on the life she had built. The past no longer felt like an anchor holding her down, but a stepping stone that had shaped her resilience. In the weeks that followed, Clara immersed herself in her work, pouring her energy into her new collection. Invitations to prominent fashion events arrived steadily, and her designs began to attract attention from major outlets. Clara, however, remained grounded, her humble beginnings never far from her mind. One day, Grace visited Clara's workshop with exciting news. "There's a charity gala in 2 months," she began. "They're inviting prominent designers to showcase collections, and they've requested you specifically." Clara's eyes widened. "Me? At a charity gala? That's incredible." "It's more than incredible," Grace replied. "It's a chance to make a statement. You've always said you want your work to inspire others. This is the platform to do just that." Clara accepted the opportunity, though the prospect of such a large stage was daunting. Over the next 2 months, she worked tirelessly, designing pieces that told her story of perseverance and transformation. Each garment was imbued with symbolic elements, fabrics that echoed her struggles and details that celebrated her triumphs. The night of the gala arrived, and Clara stood backstage, surrounded by models wearing her creations. The murmurs of the crowd beyond the curtain were a reminder of how far she had come. When the time came for her collection to debut, Clara stepped out alongside her models, the spotlight illuminating her journey. As the audience erupted in applause, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. The gala wasn't just a celebration of her work. It was a celebration of the strength she had found within herself. Among the crowd, she spotted familiar faces: her mother, Emma, and even Grace, all beaming with pride. After the show, Clara mingled with attendees, many of whom shared how her story had inspired them. One guest, an older woman with kind eyes, approached Clara. "Your designs are beautiful," she said, "but it's your journey that truly moves people. You've shown us what it means to rise above." That night, as Clara reflected on the gala's success, she realized something profound. Her story wasn't just about overcoming heartbreak. It was about embracing her identity, turning pain into purpose, and inspiring others to find their strength. She had risen above the shadows of her past and was ready to shine even brighter. Months after the gala, Clara's life had become a whirlwind of opportunities. Her work was featured in magazines, her designs sold internationally, and she became a voice for resilience in the fashion industry. Yet, amidst her success, she never lost sight of what truly mattered: the values instilled in her by her humble beginnings. One morning, Clara received a letter from a young woman named Sophia, who had seen her story in a magazine. Sophia wrote about her own struggles and how Clara's journey had inspired her to keep going. Clara felt a pang of recognition as she read the words, recalling her own feelings of hopelessness not so long ago. This letter sparked an idea. Clara reached out to Grace with a proposal: a mentorship program for aspiring designers from underprivileged backgrounds. Grace immediately supported the idea, and within weeks, they had created a platform where young talents could access resources, guidance, and opportunities. The program's launch event was held in the same venue as the gala, now filled with eager faces looking up to Clara. As she stood on the stage, speaking about the importance of perseverance and self-belief, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. The applause that followed was not just for her success, but for the hope she was now passing on to others. After the event, Clara walked through the venue, speaking with immense. One girl, no older than 18, approached her with tears in her eyes. "You changed my life," she said simply. Clara smiled, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "No," she replied, "you changed your own life. I just helped you see it." That night, as Clara sat in her workshop, she reflected on how far she had come. Her journey had been marked by pain, but it was the strength she found within herself that had brought her here. She realized that her legacy was not just in the dresses she created, but in the lives she touched and the hope she inspired. Clara placed a new sketch on the table, her mind brimming with ideas. The world was full of possibilities, and she was ready to embrace them all. With a contented smile, she turned off the light, knowing that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in her life. As Clara's mentorship program gained traction, she found herself balancing her growing career with her new role as a guide for aspiring designers. The young talents she worked with reminded her of her own beginnings, their enthusiasm and hunger for success rekindling memories of her struggles and triumphs. One mentee in particular, Sophia, the young woman who had written to Clara, stood out. Her sketches were raw but full of promise, her determination unwavering despite her modest background. Clara saw a reflection of herself in Sophia and took her under her wing, teaching her not only the technicalities of design, but also the resilience needed to navigate the challenges of the industry. "You'll face moments where it feels like the world is against you," Clara told Sophia during one late-night session in the workshop. "But those are the moments that define you. Don't let fear or doubt stop you from chasing what you believe in." Sophia nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I wouldn't even be here if it weren't for you," she said. Clara smiled, knowing the truth. Sophia's strength had brought her this far, and she was simply a catalyst. Outside her mentorship efforts, Clara's career continued to flourish. Her designs were featured in a major fashion week for the first time, earning praise for their unique blend of elegance and emotional depth. But even amidst the accolades and success, Clara remained grounded, often returning to her old neighborhood to share her journey with local schools and community groups. During one such visit, she encountered a familiar face, an older neighbor who had been a quiet supporter during her darkest days. "You've come so far, Clara," the woman said, her voice tinged with pride. "But you've never forgotten where you started. That's what makes you special." The words stayed with Clara as she prepared for her next big milestone, the launch of her own brand. It was a daunting step, one that required not only vision, but also courage. Clara reflected on everything she had endured to reach this point, from the heartbreak that once shattered her to the triumphs that rebuilt her. The launch event was held in a grand venue, attended by industry leaders, friends, family, and her mates. Clara stood at the center of it all, feeling a mix of pride and humility as she unveiled her collection, a testament to her journey and the people who had supported her along the way. As the night unfolded, Clara made a point to thank everyone who had been part of her story. "This isn't just my success," she said in her speech. "It's a celebration of resilience, community, and the belief that even the hardest moments can lead to something beautiful." When the applause faded and the crowd began to mingle, Clara stood quietly at the edge of the room, watching as her designs sparked conversations and connections. For the first time in her life, she felt completely at peace. Not because she had reached the top, but because she had embraced the journey that brought her there. Morning light filtered softly through the windows of the old workshop, now transformed into a community hub brimming with promise. Clara stood by a long wooden table, arranging vibrant fabrics, sewing notions, and design sketches for the day's event. Weeks had passed since her brand's successful launch, and she had chosen to celebrate by opening her doors to those who, like her younger self, yearned for guidance. Emma arrived first, carrying fresh pastries and a knowing smile. Soon after, Clara's mother stepped in quietly, her eyes filled with pride and understanding. The neighborhood's familiar hum drifted through the open door. Laughter, footsteps, distant conversations. All this warmth had once felt unattainable, but today it flowed freely, a testament to Clara's journey. Sophia was among the first visitors. She approached Clara holding a portfolio that displayed not tentative attempts, but bold designs alive with personality and imagination. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you," she said, voice trembling slightly. Clara gently shook her head. "No," she answered, placing a reassuring hand on Sophia's. "You carried yourself here. I simply cleared a path." At that, Sophia smiled, understanding that strength and talent had always resided within her. As more guests filtered in, Clara offered not only technical insights into pattern making and fabric choice, but also the deeper wisdom she had earned through hardship. She spoke softly about resilience, urging her mints to embrace setbacks as the shaping tools of their character. People paused to listen, nodding, absorbing her words as if storing them away for future battles against uncertainty. In a small corner of the room, Emma chatted with a group of aspiring designers, her laughter weaving seamlessly into stories of Clara's earliest days at the sewing machine. Nearby, Clara's mother comforted a young artist unsure of her next step, assuring her that doubt was simply part of learning to trust oneself. By midday, the space hummed with quiet determination as newcomers tested stitches on donated machines and leafed through pattern books that Clara had personally selected. Each person carried their own hopes and burdens, but here they found encouragement and community, stitched together with kindness. As twilight settled, warm lamplight revealed contented smiles and hushed conversations that refused to end too soon. When Clara finally signaled that it was time to close, there were lingering handshakes and grateful embraces. Watching everyone depart, she realized her legacy wasn't measured by fame or fortune, but by the sparks of possibility she helped ignite in others. Standing at the threshold, Clara cast a final glance at the workshop. The night air felt gentle as Emma joined her, and her mother looped an arm through hers. Together, they stepped into the street, leaving the glow of the workshop behind. In its place, a gentle certainty remained. What Clara had built would outlast her own journey. It would live on in the dreams, determination, and courage of all those she had encouraged to believe in their own worth. We all face moments that shatter our expectations and force us to rebuild our lives with new purpose. Clara's journey proved that even the deepest wounds can become the seeds of resilience, compassion, and a brighter future. If her transformation touched something within you, if it reminded you that hope can bloom where despair once lingered, don't let this story fade into silence. Comment below and share your own reflections. Like this video to help its message reach others in need of inspiration. And if you believe in the power of stories to lift us up and guide us through our darkest hours, subscribe to this channel. Join a community committed to growth, empathy, and the unbreakable human spirit.